completing their training for desert warfare overseas, 20,000 men of the armored force gather to hear music of war. Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony, the 100-piece orchestra under direction of Loepold Stokowski, has been transported far into the desert to entertain one of the hardest working units in the Army. Guest of honor is Madame Ivy Litvinov, wife of the Russian ambassador to the United States.
General Gillum, Mr. Stokowski, ladies and gentlemen of the orchestra, fellow entertainers, and my dear boys, it was certainly worth coming from Los Angeles out to the desert to have such a wonderful welcome as you are giving us all. I'm not sure that it wasn't worth coming all the way from Moscow. I understand that you give me this wonderful welcome because you see in my presence, you feel that you can greet the hosts of brave and gallant people, men and women and soldiers of the Red Army in the Soviet Union. And now I'll tell you something. There's thousands and thousands of you here before me. And perhaps I can see in all these thousands of soldier boys, my own soldier boy out there in the Soviet Union, who is in the aviation corps.
Also on hand is the Hollywood arsenal, Edward G. Robinson.
What do you hear from the mob? Now, what do you think? Here I am, muscling in on this concert racket. How about it, you know? Highbrow music. I want to tell you, Mudge, from now on, you're going to buy your symphonies for me, or I'll sing my mob on you. And now I'm supposed to tell you something about this wonderful music that you're going to hear tonight. Now, this music was written by a soldier, a Russian soldier, one who fought in one of the greatest battles of this war, the Siege of Leningrad. That battle is still going on, and Dmitri Shostakovich is still in it.
The Battle of the Atlantic continues. German U-boats running in wolf packs prowl the stretches of the ocean from the great Arctic Circle to the southern route in a desperate Nazi move to prevent American soldiers and supplies from reaching Europe and Africa. Ships have gone down, yes, but not at a rate sufficient to please Hitler. For though he's thrown everything in the book at us, the vast bulk of our shipping still reaches port, thanks to the guts of American and British seamen who fight a war the Nazis can't understand, a war of free men against slaves, a war in which a guy takes a beating and burning oil and comes back for more. These men of the Merchant Marine and the Navy have been torpedoed 3, 4, and 5 times. And still they rise from the sea to find new ships and keep the vital lanes of the Atlantic open to two-way traffic. These men have made Lend-Lease work in a continuous round trip, and recent changes in German Naval High Command are proof that they know they've got a hell of a fight on their hands, and it's a fight we're beginning to win. With every resource in their control, the United States and Great Britain are fighting the Battle of the Atlantic. Shipbuilding figures have jumped from 1942's 8 million tons to 16 million planned for 1943. But a ship not sunk is better than a new ship built. And in modern schools, U.S. and British merchant sailors are learning the new devices of anti-U-boat warfare. The campaign against the submarine is winning its battle too, and by 1943 has shrunk the annual toll for Axis submarines from 19 Allied ships to 7. Not only has detection apparatus been amazingly improved, depth charge efficiency is greater and more deadly. Tons of TNT rain down on Hitler's raiders from navies determined to protect the vital Allied war supplies. Here's a hit, and below the water, Nazi sailors and equipment are blown to kingdom come. On the sea and in the air, the Battle of the Atlantic continues. Slowly but surely we forge ahead so that our convoys move in safety to pile up men and materials as the forerunner of an invasion of the continent.
This is the enemy on the march, somewhere in China. Some of you will meet these men. It pays to know what makes them tick. They look pretty much like any other soldiers when the terrain is normal. It is when they face primitive and difficult conditions like fording a swollen river that they differ from you. Differ in what they think, in what they feel. Like slaves, the Japanese obey their masters. Watch them with their horses. You can tell a lot by the way a man treats a horse. These pictures speak for themselves. Now watch them going through mud and muck to reach an objective. These men struggling desperately over impassable roads are used to dirt and filth and what we would call self-sacrifice. They don't consider it sacrifice because for centuries they have been trained to obey the will of their emperor. Human lives are worthless. The individual is without value. When we face conditions like these, we solve them because we know the reason for the job we're doing. The Japanese do not know. They simply follow authority blindly. When they start into battle, as they are doing here, this philosophy, so foreign to us, makes them damn good soldiers. But it's also their weakness. They can be beaten by men who are trained as well and better than they are, because the men the Japanese are meeting now know the reasons for the fight. If these Jap soldiers had some cousins on Guadalcanal, they know how true that is. In these pictures, the Japanese have won. They've captured a Chinese village. But Yanks, with superior equipment, knowing how to use it and what they are using it for, will make them change these shouts of Banzai to Uncle.
These men of Fort Knox, Kentucky, are being shut off from the world for 26 days. They have volunteered to serve as guinea pigs for the Army Medical Research, to find how men may best be conditioned and equipped for fighting in the blistering heat of the desert or in sweltering jungle humidity. It's 120 degrees or higher for 10 hours of each 24. As the men hike their daily 12.5 miles on the treadmill, they have a feeling they can last only a few minutes. But within 3 days, these men will find themselves immune to heat exhaustion. The amount of liquid each man loses in perspiration is checked to learn minimum water requirements for desert fighters. At night, men relax as best they can, the temperature lowered to 90 degrees. They see mirages, tall, frosty mint juleps and Tom Collinses, tall, cool blondes. They dream of a white Christmas. In the same room, experiments are being made to improve tank ventilation and insulation. For only when they are reasonably comfortable in their tight quarters can tank crews operate efficiently. Adjoining the hot box is the cold room, where other volunteers test the efficiency of Army clothing in protecting them from bitter cold. A wired thermometer device called the thermocouple will record the man's temperatures at various points of the body throughout the experiments. Without the Army's special equipment, a man would freeze to death in his sleep. With the thermocouple attached, the temperature of a man's body in a sleeping bag will be checked constantly from another room without disturbing him. What will this man dream of? Definitely not a white Christmas. Now doctors will learn if the equipment worn by these men is warm enough to prevent freezing and frostbite on the march. This mask is a special issue for troops in extreme cold. Like their buddies in the hot room, they must move about continuously and report any discomforts to the attending doctor. Frozen eyelashes don't count. Their actual temperatures are being recorded in an outer office by another medic who reports where the cold hits each man and how hard. The tank also is undergoing the same cold weather efficiency tests so that the crew inside it may perform their duties under livable conditions. Better insulation will be the result. Actually improved in health by the tests, these men have played a vital part in the War Department's policy of doing everything possible to safeguard America's soldiers. But with men like these, in tanks like this, the fight for freedom is being waged.
We've come to this naval hospital in California to talk to a man who was on the aircraft carrier Hornet as she fought to the death in the South Pacific. No particular heroes are being singled out. Here men are healing from the wounds of grim battle in the Pacific. Among them, the Navy and the Marines, is our man from the Hornet, Tom Kuykendall, electrician's mate, first class. What was your regular duty on the Hornet, Tom?
Well, I was in charge of ventilation. My battle station was in a repair party below decks.
We were expecting trouble that day, Tom.
Yeah, plenty of trouble. The Japs had a big task force out off the Santa Cruz Islands looking for us, and we were looking for them.
And if the Japs had got by you guys, they'd probably try to knock us off Guadalcanal.
They would have knocked you guys off if we weren't there.
Well, they never did.
Well, anyway, our planes were off deck looking for the Japs, and the Jap planes were out looking for us. Our task force was steaming along, ready for the fighting that was bound to come. And brother, it came. Every man was at his battle station. When they spotted the first Jap planes, a yell went up, and all hell started popping. The Carrier X was first to get it. With its planes off fighting the Jap task force, it didn't have much air protection, but its gun crews put up a great fight. There goes one of the 50 Jap planes knocked down in the first 10 minutes of fighting. And that burning oil is all that's left of other Jap planes. During this breather in the battle, our men worked like hell to get the fires under control. Back from an attack on the Japs, an American plane with its tail rudder shot off lands as near to its carrier as possible. Two destroyers hurried to the rescue. And now the second wave of Japs comes over. Looking at these pictures is almost like being where I was on the Hornet, below deck. You can see what they're doing to our ships, but you can't see what our pilots are doing to the Jap force. I know for sure, though, that on all ships our men fought with all the guts in the world, trying to put out fires and knock down the Japs and keep their ships afloat all at once. On the Hornet, I was knocked out by the first bomb and burned pretty bad. But whether you're hit or on your feet fighting, you never forget how you all went through this together, giving everything you had. That's the closest to being what they call brother Americans I know of. The Navy knew this was going to be a battle royal, but it was willing to risk its flat tops for what was at stake. I don't mind telling you we were glad to hear that final score in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. 100 Jap planes destroyed, 50 more planes probably in the soup, 3 Jap carriers damaged by the planes that had taken off from our decks, 1 battleship damaged, 5 cruisers damaged. We lost a carrier and a destroyer. On a damage list were 3 carriers, a battleship, and 5 cruisers. That's tough fighting, but we had a job to do, and the Hornet sure did her share. Well, we'd taken plenty from the Jap planes and given plenty, but they couldn't sink the Hornet. The guys that got hit were taken off to carry on to a destroyer and then transferred to a bigger ship. I don't know. That could be me in the stretcher. Later on, the Navy ordered our ships to sink the Hornet because she was in a bad way and might fall into enemy hands. They sure hated to do it. Later on, the Navy ordered our ships to sink the Hornet because she was in a bad way and might fall into enemy hands. They sure hated to do it. So that's how it was on the Hornet and the rest of the ships. A lot of real action. As long as we're convoying Army transport safely and seeing that our buddies on shore stations were protected from seaborne attack, we couldn't complain. The Japs asked for trouble, and I'm sure they've been sorry ever since.